Everybody. Our first presenter is Jane Cleland. She is a lecturer at Lehman College and the director of the Program for Professional Communications. She is in the English department. She is also the author of the Josie Prescott Antique Mysteries. Her presentation will be creating a virtual community using digital stories to connect classmates on Blackboard.
Thank you so much. Hello, and it's a pleasure to see you. Distance learning can be isolating, and having experienced that isolation myself as a teacher of online courses, I decided I needed to do something. And what I came up with was storytelling, and I think I came to it because I am a novelist, and telling stories, you know what Plato said, he who tells the best story rules the world. Storytelling has a long tradition from those of us who, if you can imagine, the cave dwellers and the lions, tigers, and bears, and there was always one of the clan who was the storyteller, and it helped us get through the night. Stories, I think, have enormous significance, and we don't pay enough attention to it. So what I want to talk about today is how I in fact use digital stories, and then I have an example for you. Excuse me. And then I understand at the end we will be glad to open it up to questions. So I thought I'd start with context. Excuse me. And I've already given you a little context, and that is that I think storytelling connects us on a deep level. More context is the specific course that I designed this assignment for. It's a new course, excuse me, called Writing for New Media. And I am the director of the interdisciplinary minor, the Program for Professional Communications, which is a hybrid of public speaking and writing. And my idea for the course, as an online teacher, this course is fully online, is to engage the students and have as much interactivity as possible. All of my slides have audio embedded in them, or I use Audacity. If it's more complex, I use video. In general, my courses, what the students are expected to do is think about what they want to write or present about, research it. We're very research oriented. Then think some more, write, think, revise, and proofread. So my goals are multiple. It started with just my feeling this kind of isolation in this online course that I didn't like. That was the first idea. But it also occurred to me, when I'm in a classroom, you get to know students. There are those that talk to you, and I always do introductions at the start where I can ferret out some information. And I do introductions online too, but it's more guarded. They're in control much more. There's no spontaneity. So I wanted to come up with an exercise to really get to let them know. Because I do this fairly early in the semester, it also really grounds that idea of think, research, think, write, think, revise, and so on. And they both have to write a script, so there's actually writing involved, and the presentation, so they have to rehearse it and so on. One of the things that's crucial is that I make the point that in a professional setting, all opinions have to be professional. We don't use the word I feel. We use what you think, what you believe, and you've got to be able to back it up with research. Even in a personal story. You'll see how this comes into play. And then, of course, all of the mechanics and timing. You can't I find it amusing here. My time allocation for this presentation is 28 minutes. It's not 30, it's not even 25, it's 28. I really appreciate that. That's the kind of, when you can get that concept in your head that people at a meeting are there for the information, not to hear you wax poetic on something. You go into the business world, really get your timing down. And that, of course, is part of what I teach. So here's the specific assignment. It's 2 parts. You have to create a digital story, and then you have to do research on classmates' behalf and write a posting to move the conversation along. There's that engagement. Part of what I want to highlight for you is I call them teams. If I have 24 students, I'll create 3 teams of 8 each. It's too much. I wouldn't ask my students to listen to 24 stories. They may want to, and they're welcome to go into other teams. It's not like it's segregated, but their assignment is to listen to the other 6 or 7 or 8, however it works out. So in order to do the assignment, I have to start by explaining what digital stories are. I use extensively information that has been made available from the University of Houston, and it's terrific. It's rich. So digitalstorytelling.coe.uh, that's the University of Houston, edu/index. But if you just do a Google search for digital story in the University of Houston, you'll get right here. You're going to see some of what I like about it in just a moment. But I also want to mention that I also use Cowbird. Cowbird is the largest digital library in the world. Here's how they describe themselves. And it is one word, Cowbird. And on the frequently asked questions, one of them is, why isn't it called Bird Cow? And his answer is, because that would be ridiculous. Cowbird is a public library of human experience, offering a simple set of storytelling tools for free and without ads. 45,000 plus authors from 183 countries have told 78,000 plus stories on 27,000 plus topics. It's a wonderful site, and I really enjoyed tracing it. I will tell you that it's organized by a fellow named Jonathan Harris, who lives in Brooklyn. But it wasn't easy to find that out. I traced him, I hunted him down. Here's what you see when you go to the University of Houston site, and you can see it's extensive, really wonderful and rich. One of the ways I start is by going over the 8 steps of digital storytelling. And I'm going to take you through that. This is the process. It was created by Samantha Morda. So we go over some examples, and I have 2. You can do digital storytelling either as video or still photography, and I use still photography because it's simpler. I will tell you that I spend the first few weeks of my course helping them with technology. Just the idea of recording. They don't always have the capability. They have to go to IT. That's fine. But if they're on a Mac, it has to be converted for PC. That's part of the requirements. And even though it is, I don't mean to sound like I'm oversimplifying, but it's really simple to do this. They struggle. And so I made the decision that I just was not going to video in this course at this point in the beginning. So that's why I do it this way. So there's this one example of a family photo. These are all from the University of Houston, and one that is reflections on a letter. The family photograph is an Italian grocery store. It's an old family photo, and it's the current generation reflecting on what it would have been like to be his great-grandfather who had this grocery store. The reflections on a letter is a letter, it's a Japanese girl who is a foreign student at the university, and the letter she wrote to herself expressing her dreams and ambitions, and she is reflecting on how bad she feels that she has not accomplished as much as she expected by the time she was 18. So step one, you come up with an idea, and what I encourage them to do is really literally come up with 2 to 5 key points about that idea. And that becomes the structure. And one of the things I, as a writing teacher, teach them is that structure is king. Clarity, by the way, is queen, but structure is king. You cannot write a coherent anything unless you have it structured. So these key points become the structure. And then you research. The grocery store, how the author explains his research into what life was like for the former generations. And then I just pose this question to help them think about it. What do they wish they knew about the image? And is there a way to find it out? You have to write a script. I don't want anyone ad-libbing, so this becomes a separate writing assignment. It's a skill set to be able to ad-lib, and some speakers are good at it and others are not. You don't have to be good at it in order to succeed in your career. What you have to be good at is keeping on message, using the right words, timing, pace, inflection, and so on. And I make that important point. I also give them specific things to rehearse. First of all, timing. But also, if there are words that are hard for them to pronounce, find a synonym. Or figure out how to express the name of the person that you're struggling with phonetically. Like, anticipate problems, which precludes you getting into the trap. And of course, sentences that are too long. I love short sentences. I teach UGVs, the dreaded UGVs. An UG is an uncited generalization, and V is vague words or terminology. They are dreaded because they're not allowed. You may not use the word many, several, numerous, for example. You can't say, everybody loves family. Yeah, right. Give me a citation on that one, and I don't think you'll find it. It has to be research-based when you're making these statements. Confirm grammar, and we go verb by verb. About 70% of my students are non-native speakers, and one of the issues they really struggle with is subject-verb agreement. And so I teach them how to do it, and we go verb by verb, making sure it's in agreement. They're thirsty for this information. Now we're preparing it. We talk a little bit about storyboarding, what that is, the pacing. And in terms of gathering art, I teach them a little bit about design. I did this because the first time I taught it, they were just skewing photos to make them fit. And it's so unprofessional. It looks amateurish. You lose the integrity of the photo. So I go over some basic design principles, including don't do that, don't do that. And then, of course, you don't put yellow text on white. You don't put red on pink. Basic design considerations. One of the things I love as an author is protecting copyright. And on the University of Houston site, they even have where you can get copyright-free and royalty-free music. Because feel free to add in music if that would be of interest to you. You pull it together, you share it, you post it, right? And then you reflect on the feedback you got, on what your experience of doing it was like, which brings us back to that beginning of that circle, and we're ready to start again. So the assignment, here's the assignment. Photograph a meaningful object in your house. Say why. You have a couple of minutes to do it, 2 to 5 minutes, and you're to tell us a story. It needs a beginning, a middle, and an end. You're going to write a script and record it. You're going to insert the photo in PowerPoint, one slide, and then you're going to use the recording function of PowerPoint to read your script. And we talk about reading with inflection and so on. And here's the rule. Your audio must work with a PC. Okay. Jeanette Geralt, one of my students, kindly gave me permission to use her story, and here it is.
I lived my whole life governed by fear, and whatever challenges life brings my way. But the truth is, I have good days and bad. Now don't get me wrong, I have no intention of giving up and giving in to these negative feelings. It's quite the opposite, in fact. I struggle every day to build myself up because I know I'm worth the effort. But I won't lie, sometimes it is exhausting. On days when I feel most defeated, I like to look at the words typed out on these 2 index cards. I've had these cards for quite some time now, as you can tell by the yellowing of the paper. The index cards were given to me by a dear friend. He typed up these words and gave them to me to help remind me that with inner growth, it is possible to shrink fear. And so I read these words and I let them seep in, and I tell myself that it won't always be this difficult. But I sometimes wonder if it will ever be possible to shrink fear enough to make it disappear. I guess the only way I'll find out is by continuing on my journey of inner growth. Wish me luck.
Part 2 of the homework, you'll recall, is to do research on your colleague's behalf and write a posting about it. This is all on one discussion board. And remember, again, you're in teams of 7, 8, 9. So what's not allowed is something like great job. You have to actually move the conversation along. And here's a posting done by Rick Ortiz, who wrote, Jeanette, I'm afraid all the time too. Mostly I'm scared of screwing up. The good news is we're not alone. Upwards of 40% of people admit that they struggle with fear, and I insist on in-text citations. So there's a lot of research being done on the subject. I don't love a lot, but he then went on, so it's not awful, but that's an UG of an UGV. Check out, and he put in a link for an article from Forbes, which offers 5 proven strategies to overcome fear. As Charlie Brown once said, I've developed a new philosophy. I only dread one day at a time. I hope this helps you cope. Doing this research gave me a little boost. And Jeanette replied that I think it was the 3rd proven strategy was one she'd never thought of before, and that she was absolutely going to put it to it became a conversation, and that's the goal. While allowing me to know something about Jeanette that I wouldn't have otherwise known. And I'm ready for questions. I don't know where we are time-wise.
You have 10 minutes.
How about that? Any questions? Yes.
Do you think that students might open up more online than they would in a classroom situation?
That's an interesting question, isn't it? Whether students will open up more online than in a classroom. There's an anonymity of online that I think we've seen fair amount of evidence. People would say things online, look at all the negative and the flaming and so on, that they would never think of saying in person. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if it translates. I think that's perhaps true. One of the storytelling exercises I do in person is I ask people to do a presentation on their favorite hobby or leisure activity. How did you come to it? Why do you like it? What does it mean to you? What do you get out of it? That sort of thing. And I did that because I wanted to pick something neutral. Mm-hmm. I would never ask anyone to talk about fear. Right. So I'm wondering if it is not just that they feel comfortable doing it, but also that I framed an assignment that let them take it in any direction. I mean, one student, the photograph was of his favorite guitar, right? And another student, it was of a baby picture. In one that I did, as an example, I picked my cat, a particular photo of my cat where she was only 14 weeks old and she had her hand on and it just, what I talked about was unconditional love. That people say they love you unconditionally, but they don't really mean it. What they mean is they'll forgive you no matter what you do. And I contrasted that with my cat, Angela, who there was no wrong I could do. She just thought I was perfect. And that's a pretty wonderful thing to think about. So yes, I think the answer is probably yes. Yes.
I might have missed it because I came in while you were speaking, but what course do you use this digital storytelling?
It's ENW 3100. I'm at Lehman College.
Yes.
Writing for new media. Writing for new media. But it's worked so well, I may adapt it to other online courses that I teach. And I would use the same thing, no matter what the course is, because it becomes a writing project and a research project. And I just think it's a very nice way to start the semester. I do have a more traditional digital story they have to do, introducing themselves. What year are you at Lehman? What's your major? That kind of thing. So we do that the first week. This is week 3. This comes up. Yes?
Do you ever have opposition from students as far as sharing their stories?
No, because one of the things I do, as I mentioned, I do an audio recording in all my slides. So I make the point, as I'm explaining the assignment, that you can share as much or as little personal information as you choose. There's absolutely no limits. If you want to share your favorite cooking pot, the pan that's cast iron that you like, that's fine. It can be absolutely anything. So I have not. Where's some wood to knock? Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.